Civil War was paid for. The War of 1812, that's how it was paid for. There was accountability. And the government had to go, the federal government had to go to the states for the money. Why? Because our founders thought that the federal government was this, a 10-mile square area. That's it. That had authority over imposts, forts, magazines. They never envisioned this monolithic structure that we have now in Washington, D.C. So if you lived in California, for example, and California had 10% of the population, you get 10% of the bill. That's what enumeration, according to the census, means. Now, before 1913, Congress had tried to lay a direct tax on the people before, a capitation tax. It was a tax that existed in 1894, which we'll discuss in a minute. The Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional because you cannot have a direct tax without having apportionment and accountability. Now, an indirect tax, according to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, and pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. All duties, imposts, excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Remember the word uniform, because both of these types of taxes have to meet a certain law. This is the law of uniformity. What does that mean? If you buy a gun in Colorado and you pay a certain amount of tax on it, and you buy a gun in Maine, it has to be uniform. If there's a buggy tax, it has to be uniform. All direct taxes have to be uniform. Ask yourself, if the IRS, if the income tax is an indirect tax, is it paid uniformly? If you make $100,000 here in Colorado, and someone in Maine makes $100,000, do you pay the same amount of tax? Is it uniform? No, it's how slick your accountant is, isn't it? Where you can give up all these deductions, which is all unconstitutional. And the only reason that we have an income tax, and we've fallen for this, is because we, the people, have become narcissistic and selfish and self-absorbed. As George Washington said, it is we, the people, who are the keepers of the Constitution. It's on us. And more than any other time in our history, it's on us. It's what we will do from here on out that will determine whether we have any sort of liberty at all in this country. So let's take this a little further and go through some definitions. A capitation tax is an assessment by the government upon a person, upon a fixed, regardless of income or worth. Duties are levied on imports and excise tax. Imposts is a tax, a change, or a levy on the nature of a tax. And excise is any kind of tax which is not directly on property. Why property? Because it's an inalienable right, or any inalienable right. Remember, the hierarchy of power that our founding fathers saw is one, there was a creator. And the creator created sovereigns. That's you and I. The word sovereign means kings and queens upon the earth. You walk this earth as a king and queen? Do you have that kind of sovereign authority? Do you believe you have it? And sovereigns have inalienable rights, unalienable. Nobody can take them away. Unfortunately, the founders didn't enumerate all of, because there are too many to enumerate. Is marriage an inalienable right in your mind? Yes, it is. It's not in the Constitution. But they enumerated 10 of them, which we call the Bill of Rights, and which we have allowed them mostly to be usurped. And they've been usurped mainly by this coup that you didn't get a memo about, or it's not in your textbook. But here are the main categories of tax. Direct tax based on inalienable rights. Indirect taxes based on privileges, on activities. It's never levied on people or their property. Now, let's go to the Revenue Act of 1894. Congress tried to pass a tax on inalienable rights of real estate and real property, and pass it off with an indirect tax. The court ruled it was unconstitutional because it applied a direct tax and apportionment. The law has not changed. You cannot have a direct tax and not have it be apportioned by the census. So, in this case, the Pollock case versus Farmer Loan and Trust, the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional. It ruled 5-4 that the income tax violated the Constitution imposed pursuant therewith, and everybody had to pay for that 1 year. The government had to give everybody's money back. Imagine that for the whole year. Because you could not foist the income tax as a direct tax because it was not collected. And all direct taxes are capitation taxes. So then it said, in the Brushaber case, this is all you really need to know, that bottom part, the 16th Amendment gives Congress no new powers of taxation. Say what? That the 16th Amendment passed in 1913 gave Congress no new powers. But it put it in the category, it said, in the category that it had to be because it couldn't be a tax on an inalienable right. And your income is an inalienable right, although it's not defined. And there's a reason why it's not defined. You get the picture here? No new taxes. Then there was a case, Stanton versus Baltic Mining. By the previous ruling, it was settled that the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation, but simply prohibited the previous complete and plenary power of income taxation possessed by Congress from the beginning, from being taken out of the category of indirect taxation to which it inherently belonged. So now, here's the Supreme Court saying, well, income tax must be, because it's not a direct tax, governed by the census, so it must be an indirect tax. But then there's this nagging little thing called the law of uniformity. And so, what did the government choose to do? It chose to ignore the law of uniformity. And what did we, the people, do? We ignored the law of uniformity. So here's a breakdown of the general two different categories. See, this, you hear all this talk today about a flat tax. Well, Germany adopted a flat tax, just 10%. And you hear that knocked around a lot. We don't need that tax. As a matter of fact, in 1913, it was so embarrassing because the Treasury of the United States had such a glut. But when you do things like take away import taxes under, quote, free trade laws, then you take away the government's ability to compete. American workers to compete. Sure, our companies will use the slave labor of China. Just go buy something at Walmart's and see where it's made. And we, the people, have allowed that to happen. We support that slavery because we don't protect American workers and American jobs anymore. Because we didn't get a memo about the coup of 1913.